Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your brand new source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. We are here on a Friday night to break down the pregame for the Packers-Bears Week 12 matchup this Sunday. And I am here, as always, with my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
Doing well. We're into December now.
Yep.
Rolling around towards Christmas for those of you who enjoy Christmas. Which
Mariah Carey has appeared from her hole in the ground to bless our ears once again.
So, how many weeks is it till Christmas when she sees her shadow or not?
Yeah, I think
it sounds very, very Groundhog Day-esque.
It is, honestly. She makes her way back out here about once a year, and it's about that time of the year. Whatever holidays you celebrate, we hope you have a happy holidays. But we are here to break down what is surely to be an awful game between two, frankly, awful teams, between the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears.
I think this game has potential to be entertaining. There could be some points run up because both defenses are terrible.
I actually was going to say that. Take the over in this game. The Packers are 4-8. The Bears are 3-9. It's going to be something because both defenses are, like my dad said, pretty damn bad and prone to giving up large sums of points. And bonus content for this game, they're playing for who has the most all-time wins, Dad.
I know. This is like there are stakes here.
There are stakes.
This is why the Packers aren't going to tank. This is their chance to the Bears and Packers are tied for wins all time in the NFL.
Yep.
So the winner this week moves into first place.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The Bears have been in first place or have not been out of first place since almost 80, 90 years.
I was going to say, I wouldn't even know. A long time.
Before you were
30... born.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's possible it's even before, is it that long? Could it be that long ago? Before my dad was born? Possibly.
It could be, but all that coming to an end. And, of course, the Packers still have a 2% chance of making the playoffs, so let's not forget that. Still on the table.
They're big stakes. People might be watching Tankathon.com to see where the Packers draft picks are, but they're still shooting for the playoffs.
Who's watching Tankathon, Dad? Not me. I would never. I would never have already done make more than one. I would never have already done 4 mock drafts picking at the Packers' 8th overall spot right now. But anyway,
well, at least you aren't setting it up to pick at the number 2 overall spot.
I mean, shoot, if I could, I would. But anyway, the Packers are playing this weekend. We're going to break it all down for you. But first, we just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you enjoy what you're listening to, we'd really appreciate if you came follow us on our socials. On Twitter, @FatherSonPacker. We tweet out when we have new episodes, when we have any articles we find interesting, videos we find interesting. We just tweeted out a video Darius Slay, the corner for the Eagles, had talking a bit about Jordan Love and Christian Watson, etc., that the Volume posted and we found interesting, so we retweeted it. And any Packers news, injury notes, analysis, stuff that we find interesting that other Packers content creators are making. We just like sharing that because we think that you might find it interesting. And then if you really like us, come subscribe to us on YouTube because it would really help our numbers. Father Son Packers podcast on YouTube. And we would really appreciate it. Dad, you got anything to add there? Should we get into this break?
Yeah, well, Darius Slay was singing Jordan Love's praises after that game.
Yeah, he was singing Jordan Love's praises. He told Christian Watson during the game, "Slow down, Roadrunner. Slow down," which was one of my favorite quotes. And he said that A.J. Dillon's got the biggest legs he's ever seen. Was some fun quotes from that video. I'd recommend checking it out if you haven't already. But anyway, let's get into this game breakdown, and let's start with the injury report. Dad, pretty clean on both sides. We're going to read it through right now. We are recording on Friday, so we do have official designations out. For the Packers, big surprise today, Dad. The big one is David Bakhtiari will be out after undergoing an appendectomy today.
Yeah, I saw that he, first thing I saw this morning about it was that he didn't practice today. It's like, oh, I guess they decided to give him a second day off this week. And then it wasn't until 10 hours later or something that I saw he's got an appendectomy today. Yeah, so who knows how long he's going to be out with that.
Yeah, that
abdominal surgery can take a while to recover from.
Yeah, it could knock him out a while. He did tweet after that he's feeling all right. He's just resting up, so obviously good. Hope you rest up, Bakhtiari. Take some time, take care of yourself. But he did tweet that he just kind of went to the team doctor with some abdomen pain. He thought he had a strained ab or something like that, and they said, no, you need surgery. So he will not be playing this weekend. I would expect Zach Tom to step in at left tackle for him. It's kind of what they've done this year when Bakhtiari's had to miss suddenly last minute. And, it's always good to let the rookies get some play, especially because the Packers are kind of out of it now a little bit. Not technically, but mostly. Beyond that, Devondre Campbell, who has been missing since the Bills game, is questionable for this game after practicing in a limited capacity all week. I actually expect him to play. I think that he has a good chance of playing, especially after practicing all week. And he practiced
maybe
one day
he can
last
save
week
this
too.
defense.
No,
yeah,
disagree.
that he'll provide some organization, and players will know where they're supposed to go if he's out there running the defense. I don't know. I'm
Not
sprinkling,
optimistic.
unicorn dust and fairy dust on the prospects for the team now.
Already dusty and crusty Packers defense. But it'll be nice to get him out there because it's fun to watch him play.
And Dobbs is also limited practice all week.
Exactly. That was the next one we were going to get to. He is questionable, limited all week. We might get to see the future of this receiver core in Watson and Dobbs side by side. I think they've only played like 5 snaps together or something.
No, it's not that few. I saw somebody tweet
really
it. I can't remember who. No, it was like 54.
Okay.
Total.
Okay.
But less than a game's worth.
I was going to say about a game's worth.
I guess it's spread out.
Yeah.
No,
so
but,
Dobbs most likely hopefully, I wouldn't say most likely. Matt LaFleur said he wasn't sure. It's definitely on the table. Matt LaFleur and his coach speak, but hoping Dobbs will play and we'll get to see them together. Then beyond that,
Matt LaFleur and his coach speak, what you mean is what he says doesn't mean anything.
Name a more iconic duo and Matt LaFleur. I mean, it's like the McCarthyism where it's like, that's Mike McCarthy.
Right, not former Wisconsin Red Scare Joe Red Scare McCarthy.
But anyway, McCarthyism, well, it's like anything, which was always a great quote. And then beyond that, last item on the Packers injury report, 2 things. Savage, doubtful for this game, kind of expected, got hurt very early in the Eagles game and didn't come back. And then Rodgers is not on the injury report at all, so it's going to be good to go for him.
In some ways, that's the big surprise. Everybody was already a week ago talking about how, this is going to be the battle of the backups at QB.
Yeah, and now we're going to get the starters because...
And neither Fields nor Rodgers has an injury designation.
Exactly. And that's a great transition over to the Bears side of the injury report where, like you said, Fields does not carry an injury designation in this game, so it sounds like he is going to play. Beyond that, they have similar-sized injury report to ourselves, if not a little bit larger. First off, just to lead off, they recently placed both Darnell Mooney, their number 1 wide receiver, and Eddie Jackson, their starting former Pro Bowl safety, onto injured reserve, so they're not going to have either of them for this game. Beyond that, on their actual official injury report, Larry Borum, one of their offensive linemen, is going to be out this game. Jaquan Brisker, their starting safety, one of their other starting safety, is going to be out this game, so keep an eye on that secondary for them. They are going to be a little bit dinged up. Kyler Gordon, one of their starting corners, also out, another member of their secondary. Trevor Siemian, their backup quarterback, is going to be out, and he's going to be out for the season now because of an oblique injury he sustained in warm-ups in their last game.
That was the guy they thought was going to be starting instead of Fields just a week ago.
Yeah, you know who their backup is now?
It's Tim Boyle Laser Show.
Is it? I think it's still Nathan Peterman, and Tim Boyle is the third.
Maybe Boyle is, yes. You're probably right.
But that's a good catch, though, because I had forgotten that Tim Boyle Laser Show, former Packers legend, has now signed with the Chicago Bears. Beyond that, Riley Reif, one of their starting O-linemen, is questionable, but he did practice in full on Friday, so I would expect him to play. And Kendall Vildor, one of their corners, is also questionable, but also practiced in full on Friday, so I expect him to play as well. Anything that strikes you on these, Dad, or should we move on?
I mean, the big thing you'll see, and we'll talk about it later, is the Bears' secondary is a train wreck into a burning dumpster of tires.
And we know a lot about train wrecks into burning dumpster of fires. We know one when we see one. Yeah, they're really dinged up. Missing both starting safeties, missing one of their starting corners. I mean, it's tough. And it's definitely going to be something the Packers are going to look to exploit, I think. And we're definitely going to talk about that later. But, Dad, should we move into the meat of our game preview?
Yeah, let's go into start with our blast from the past. And so since it's a division rival, we don't have to go that far in the past. So the Packers won their earlier matchup in Green Bay in week 2, 27-10. In that game, Justin Fields only passed for 70 yards.
Yeah.
Only 48 net passing yards because he got sacked 3 times and threw 1 pick. And he also only ran for 20 yards. So some things are a lot different now. I think it was a few weeks after that, but they really started pushing the Fields running narrative and letting him have more designed runs, and where he basically started leading the league in rushing yards per game. But the Bears still ran on the Packers very effectively. They had 180 yards at 6.7 yards per carry in that game. For the Packers, Sammy Watkins had his best game of the year, where he had 93 yards receiving, I think, on 4 catches. But some of the plays that they used for him, like I think he had the one long play on a slant across the middle. And those are some of the plays that now I think running for Watson, who could run that play and take it to the house after he's got it in his hands with his speed. They combined for 203 yards rushing. Most effective was Jones, had a big game. I think he averaged like over 8 yards per carry. They had 2 sacks from Preston and 1 from Gary, of those 3 sacks of Fields. And that was when Jair had his interception late in the game to seal the game. I think that was the one that this interception in game 2. And Rodgers was what?
I was going to say, this was the game where it felt like the Packers were kind of like, oh, well, they'll put it together.
We had our stinker week 1, and now we're starting to put it together. Rodgers was only sacked 1 time by Robert Quinn, Eagles, who's now in Philadelphia. So the other thing about, not only do the Bears are missing there's 2 starting safeties, and their quarterback who's had the most snaps. They've also traded away their best pass rusher and their best inside linebacker.
Yeah, it's a very different team than and they traded for their now starting receiver Chase Claypool. It's a very different team than they played.
Right. They gave away one of their second round pick, which is looking like a top 35, top 40 pick for Chase Claypool.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very different team than this blast from the past shows.
Yeah. You want to talk about what's going on more generally in Bears world then?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Bears world. We like to catch you up on what our opponents have been up to. And for the Bears, they are 3-9. They are last place in the NFC North. They are 1 game back from the Packers. They lost last week to the New York Jets 31-10. However, like we said, they were missing their starting quarterback, Justin Fields, who missed that game with a separated shoulder that he suffered against Atlanta.
Non-throwing shoulder.
Non-throwing shoulder.
Yes. Just for our listeners, this is non-throwing shoulder.
Yes, and it's something to keep in mind for this game, that not only did he suffer that shoulder injury in that game, which has been the big talking point and was the reason that he was held out of last game, he also suffered a bit of a hamstring injury in that game that hasn't been as reported, but that might impact some of his mobility and is definitely something to keep an eye on. Prior to that game against the Jets, though, where they got blown out, they had actually played 3 very close games against some decent competition. They were all losses, but they played against the Falcons, Lions, and Dolphins and lost those 3 games by a combined 7 points. Very close games. And over those 3 games, Fields was averaging nearly 137 rushing yards per game, which is pretty crazy. And we're going to get more into that as we go into our breakdown. But that's kind of what's going on in Bears world. They are, I would say, probably pretty hopeful about the way that Fields has gone this year. He's still struggled to throw the ball at times, but he's definitely showed a lot more dynamism than he had in previous starts and in the previous year.
Yeah. And they've also been willing to let him do what he's best at, essentially. That has perked up their offense, which is running with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this, because let's get into what makes the Bears a tough matchup. If you don't mind, I would like to start. The big thing, like you've been saying, is Fields' rushing ability. Per Zare Kansabedian, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, on Twitter, from week 3 to week 6, this is kind of about the Bears' game plan in general and what has changed since the last time the Packers have played them. From week 3 to week 6, though, Fields averaged 1 designed run per game. From week 7 to 10, however, the coaching staff really kind of cranked up that designed run button.
To 11
designed run dial, crank buttons, up to 6 designed runs per game over that time span. I didn't have stats for week 11, but just They're up to from 1 design running game to 6 design running games. Big difference there. And since that Week 7 New England game where they kind of cranked those up, Fields has averaged 110 rushing yards per game, 8.1 yards per carry, and has had at least 1 rushing touchdown in every game. So, real big change in their offense from the last time the Packers played them. And not only is he steadily getting chunks, he's also creating a lot of explosives in the QB running game. He's had 2 different 60-yard carries in that time frame. And this rushing ability has really opened up their offense. Over this same time frame, so from Week 7 to Week 11, they averaged 29.6 points per game against some pretty decent defenses. New England, Dallas, Miami. And that 29.6 points per game, if you extrapolated it over the entire length of the season, would be tied with the Chiefs for most points per game in the league. So really opened up their offense in that time frame by letting him run and giving him some actual designed runs. He is a special athlete. I mean, he looks, it's so hard to compare because he's just fast. He runs like Christian Watson in a lot of ways. Like, he's just way faster than everyone else on the field. And
and wiggle as well.
Yeah, he's got some wiggle. But it's not even like a hard, like, he doesn't run like Lamar, where Lamar like make quick stop decisive.
Is all of the he's like playing a game of, I don't know, capture the flag out there or something where
it's
he's
not
just
like
juking in all kinds of directions and dodging, and
it's a lot of swerving, and he moves really fast, and he's really big. Like, he's not as big as Josh Allen, but he's still big.
He's pretty big. I was looking at that. He was bigger than I realized at 6'3",
Yeah.
238 or something.
Yeah, he's a big dude. He's built. But that's kind of, I think, the main thing about the Bears and what makes them a tough opponent. And we'll talk a little bit later about why that's specifically tough for the Packers. But, Dad, what do you think makes the Bears a tough matchup? Because I think I might have stolen your thunder a bit, because that's the main thing.
Well, I mean, that is the thunder. I mean, you basically covered what is the only star power on the team right now, really, for the Bears, is Fields running. They've got nothing else really to be excited about. And one thing I just add to that is Fields is on pace to break the QB rushing record for a season. Of Lamar Jackson at 12:06. At his current pace, which isn't even adjusted for how they changed the offense, as you talked about, he would end up like 12:85, I think, at his, whatever it is, 57.
And the Packers would be happy to oblige, I'm sure. Based on how they played recently.
Maybe he'll break it this week.
I know, right?
He only has, 500 to go.
If he had a game, if he took Jalen Hurts' first quarter from last week and then did that for a whole game, it's right there. He's right there.
I forget what he's actually at now, but that would get him pretty close to...
I think he's around like 860, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he could do that this game.
Exactly. Totally reasonable. He could, like, unironically, easily get to 1,000 yards this game.
Yes.
Like, he
I have thought about games like this.
Average and get to 1,000 yards.
I was thinking about this in the last game. It's like, man, what if the Packers give up the all-time single-game rushing record to a quarterback?
Oh, just like the full-on all-time.
Yes, the full-on single-game rushing mark to a quarterback.
They were on pace after one quarter last week.
Right. It is not out of the realm of possibility with the way they played run defense on a quarterback last week.
Yeah, I mean,
it could have happened. I'm thinking he could have got to 300 and broken the record for a single game.
When he ended,
forget those running backs.
When he ended with 157, I'd argue that was a nice result based on how the first quarter went.
They put the clamps on.
Oh yeah, completely shut him down in that second half.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dad, what else do you have?
So I have some more. So we can talk a little bit about the other aspects that they have going for them. I mean, they're really only good at one thing, which is running the ball. They're 10th by DVOA from Football Outsiders. Their O-line has pretty good run blocking metrics by DVO. They're 10th in adjusted line yards, and are particularly good at power rank, which is success in short yardage on third or fourth down. They're 4th in the league at that. And in stuff percentage, which are runs tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage. So as an offensive line, they're 3rd in that and 4th in the power rank. So they're good at those two metrics for run blocking. They are terrible at pass blocking, however. Dead last in adjusted sack rate.
We'll talk about what they're bad at. Let's
right.
Flowers right now.
It's almost hard not to, right? I'm trying to hold that back, and it just keeps...
You know what they say?
Those facts keep spitting out.
You know what they
I've already skipped some of the bad stuff I was going to in balance.
But you know what they say?
What's that?
The Bears still suck.
The Bears still suck.
The Bears still suck.
The numbers back that up. Montgomery is also a decent back.
Yep. Although I would say he's been a bit disappointing this year.
Yeah, and he's not. And they're missing their more effective back, which is Herbert, another guy who's out.
Yep.
Who was playing in that last game. He's averaging like 2 yards more per carry than Montgomery. Though Montgomery still had some good games. And the only place where they're not bad in pass coverage is covering number 2 wide receivers, where they're 10th. Now, here's an interesting thing I found. So, by Football Outsiders, their which measures their sack rate given up, adjusted for opponent, and they're dead last. Shockingly,
tracks.
Their pass block win rate by ESPN is 3rd in the league.
Oh, you know what that means?
3 spots. Yeah, you know what this means. So we'll get
to what that means. That means Justin Fields takes a lot of sacks.
Exactly. Which is kind of what people have been saying. But
I mean,
they're actually 3 spots above Green Bay in overall pass block win rate for the whole line.
I mean, the thing is,
and they're 7th in run block win rate.
Fields has something like, I mean, obviously, that's an artifact of how much he scrambles in some ways, but he has like the second or first longest time to throw in the league.
Right. So, yeah, some of that is maybe a second or 2 longer than it should be.
Yes. We've talked a lot about
we'll get to that.
We will get to some of his negatives as well.
But yeah, so actually their O-line by ESPN's pass blocking metrics, pass block win rate and run block win rate, which are a little different. What they're actually measuring is what percent of the time you keep the defense from pressuring the quarterback in I think it's less than 2 seconds is a loss. And as an offense, if you make it take longer than I think it's 2 seconds. I forget what the time cutoff is. But essentially measuring how often you are able to sustain a block longer than their cutoff, which might be 2 seconds. And their best graded offensive lineman is Tevin Jenkins by PFF. 4th among guards. So this is a guy a lot of Packers, including myself, thought, I kind of like this guy.
Yeah, coming in the draft.
Packers offense coming out of the draft as a tackle, and he struggled a bit, and then he got injured. But now that they moved him to guard, he's actually doing very well. And he's much better at run blocking than pass blocking. Although the ESPN grades actually like another one of their guards, Cody Whitehair, even better than Jenkins. And so their interior 3.
I've seen Whitehair before. I'm not.
Yeah, so that's also
I've seen Whitehair play.
I forget now if that was pass block win rate or run block win rate. Maybe it was run block win rate. And then so their interior 3 offensive line have actually graded fairly well by PFF. The tackles are not as good. But for running, their actually best running lane has been behind the left tackle. So those are where they've actually got some positives on offense.
Yeah. And there's some positives. I think a lot of them are Fields running game centric. And luckily for them, as we move on to talking about how they might try to exploit the Packers, quarterback run game, I mean, you couldn't have hit it more on the nail on the head for what the Packers suck at. And let's look at last week as a nice little evidence of that. I mean, the Eagles just showed the Bears the run game, the game plan. This is all you have to do is run the quarterback, and the Packers don't know what to do. I mean, like we said, Jalen Hurts ran for 102 yards in the first quarter. He ran for 157 yards overall, the 5th most by a quarterback ever. 2 of those top 5 have been against the Packers. I mean, this was just last week. This was 7 days. Or for us, it was 5 days ago. By the time this game happens, it'll be 7 days ago. Copy, paste. Like, that's all they have to do. We talked a lot about this in the pregame for last week's game, so I don't want to harp on it too much, but the Packers are just, under Joe Barry, terrible against running quarterbacks. They were bad against Josh Allen this year. They're bad against Daniel Jones this year. They were bad against Heineke last year, gave up like 95 yards to him. Bad against Tyler Huntley last year. I mean, just bad against rushing quarterbacks. Pretty much the only time they've been good against a rushing quarterback was Justin Fields in week 2, and they didn't even really have a designed run game for him yet, so I'm a little bit worried about.
It was still only like 20 yards.
It was 20 yards. It wasn't nothing, but it was like 7 for 20.
No, but it was low.
Yeah. Yes, but let's say I don't expect the same level of success.
They're going to hold him to 20 yards again.
If they hold him to 20 yards rushing, they're winning this game. By a lot.
By a lot.
By a lot. But I don't think they will. Unless his hamstring is a hamstring and shoulder. There have been a lot of speculations as to his shoulder injury and his more so his shoulder injury, but also maybe his hamstring injury, causing the Bears coaching staff to maybe lighten the load on that quarterback running game just to protect him, since they're not really playing for anything. So that is something to keep an eye on. They might just not run it with him nearly as much just to protect him.
Maybe they won't do the designed runs as much. I guess we'll see.
That's what I'm thinking. But it's really up in the air because he's not carrying an injury designation, but he does still have that AC joint injury. So it's hard to know.
And we don't know what's the story with that hamstring at all.
Exactly, and we can only go off.
Maybe it's nothing. Maybe the 2 weeks off will be. It's fine. We just don't know.
And there's only so much we can go off of. It's hard to speculate on injuries, but I think it's something to keep in mind that they might just completely dial the quarterback designed run game way back down again, and he might only be scrambles. But if they don't, the Packers allowed. I mean, just the running game in general, Packers allowed over 300 rushing yards last week. And currently, by Football Outsiders, have the dead last ranked rushing defense in the league by DVOA.
Can I just say something? Over 300 undersells it.
Yes.
Because it was actually closer to 400 than 300.
It was like 367, yes. It was a lot. I was trying to be nice to our fellow cheeseheads, Dad. I was trying to give us some hope. Yeah, it was almost 400 yards. Very well could have been 400 yards if, c'est la vie. I will say, though, David Montgomery is only averaging 52 yards a game this year and only 4 yards a carry. So there's at least that. They're not excellent running the ball either, except for quarterback runs. But yeah, so way that they're going to exploit us, if he can, quarterback run game. And it's there for him. It's there for the Bears coaching staff if they feel like they want to do it. They could run for 200. He could run for 200 yards in this game very easily. I mean, they had a quarterback spy on like half the plays last week. Did not mean jack. Didn't do
one thing. I'd like to see them change the alignment of their front a little bit to more specifically protect against designed runs. One thing they did is they didn't.
They tried to. They tried to
do that.
Cover,
they didn't cover the nose all the time. And I think that's something like one of Hurts. Maybe it's the first actually designed run. The middle is just wide open for him to run right up.
They tried to. I mean, you just see
the edge defenders. I think they needed more than
the edge defenders just crashing inside over and over again, and you're like,
that happened to Preston once, where he crashed inside, and that gave up whatever that 40-yarder, whatever that one was.
I realized this was an audio-only podcast. I was blinking furiously. I don't know if
blinking guy meme.
I don't know if that conveyed over. Yeah, blinkingguyMeme.png.gif. Whatever. But yeah, that's the main way that I think the Bears can exploit the Packers. Dad, what did you have?
So I can add to that. That, of course, is number one. But
number one was a bullet.
You've got that well covered. So what else could they possibly do? So the other thing I expect them to do is a lot of handoffs to Montgomery, possibly to the left or up the middle, and then, of course, the design runs by field. They have been, so Montgomery's been carrying the load since Herbert got injured a few weeks ago, and he's been doing okay. And that's where the Packers are weak, getting run up the middle or run anywhere. The only thing I can see them possibly trying to do in the passing game is Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
He's currently the Bears' active leader in pass as a pass catcher
in receiving yards and
receptions and receiving yards. And the Packers are only middle of the pack in guarding tight ends, 15th per Football Outsiders, and they've historically not been that great at covering tight ends. And Kmet is slightly above average as a starting tight end per PFF in receiving as well as pass and run blocking. He grades out okay as those two. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing I can see as a kind of passing game.
How do you feel the Packers have done guarding tight ends this year? Like numbers wise or just holistically, how do you feel like we've done against tight ends? I feel like it's been okay.
I haven't noticed it so much.
But I can't...
As something they've gotten burned. Other years, we had years like just getting burned by everybody. But sometimes it's hard to tell. It's like, well, if you can run for 360 yards, why throw it to the tight end? Fair.
Very fair. And
we also haven't faced any of the elite tight ends.
Yeah, I think...
Who's the best tight end we've faced this year?
I would say the best tight end they've played against is... I mean... Goodness, they haven't really played against many at all. I mean, Dawson Knox versus the Bills, he went for, I'm pulling it up right now.
We got Knox for the Bills.
I mean, he only had 2
Hawkins.
catches for 10 yards, but he had a touchdown, I think. Goddard was hurt when... Yeah,
Dalton
maybe Schultz. Goddard was hurt when they played the
Goddard
Eagles.
was already out.
So they didn't have to play him.
And we've missed Hawkinson because he wasn't on the Vikings yet.
Schultz had 6 for 54 and a touchdown, so probably Schultz. It was probably
Schultz in terms of the best tight end, I think, that they've faced so far this year.
Yeah, I mean...
But though DVOA is supposed to be, competition adjusted.
That's true. But last time they played the Bears, I mean, it's hard to put any numbers to it because they only threw for 70 yards. So,
right, the passing game is irrelevant.
Yeah,
in that game.
Yeah,
and it may be irrelevant in this game.
I was going to say the Bears' offense was irrelevant in that game. The passing game wasn't relevant. The run game wasn't relevant. That was a nice game. I enjoyed that game. But yeah, those are the ways that we think the Bears are going to try and take advantage of the Packers. Dad, do you have anything else you wanted to add there, or should we move forward?
That was it. I mean, it's
a pretty...
Because there's nothing on the defensive side that you would say they would take advantage of the Packers' offense.
Yeah.
Because their defense is straight up terrible. You know how... I was looking at this and thinking about this. The Lions, at the time we played them, had been historically terrible. One of the worst defenses around. I think the Bears are worse. I think this Bears defense right now is the worst defense the Packers are facing all year.
Yeah, I mean, it's number one, they traded away their 2 best players. Number 2, they're incredibly hurt, like super injured. They have no pass rush. I mean, let's get into this because I want to
get into this because this is some about how the Packers are going to take advantage.
Exactly. The Packers
of theirs.
should, emphasis on should, be able to score on the Bears any way they want it. Per Football Outsiders, the Bears have the 31st ranked defense by DVOA, and the gap between them and 30 is bigger than the gap between 30 and 24. They have the 31st ranked pass defense and the 28th ranked rush defense. Packers should be able to get it however they want it. Deep shots, Packers should be able to hit those because the Bears are missing both their starting safeties and one of their starting corners, and they already weren't great against the pass to begin with.
Right, even with those guys, they weren't great.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen what Christian Watson can do against, like, starting caliber, like, really good secondaries, so extrapolate as you wish with that information. So offense to defense-wise, like, Packers on offense, they should be able to score. If they can't, it's because Rodgers can't throw. That's, like, the only thing I could imagine to hold them back. And if Rodgers can't throw, just don't throw. Just run the ball.
Right, they can just run the ball.
There should be no reason that they can't score in this game. We said that about the Lions game, though, so I don't want to speak too soon.
Yeah. The one thing about the Lions game I'll say is they had just recently changed their defensive
coordinator. I know.
And I think they got that little bit of juice, when you have a change that may or may not last very long, but they had a 3-game
tendencies, nothing to game plan against, yeah. They had a 3-game win streak.
And 2 of those 3 games that Packers were one of, they got like 9 points and 12 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right after the change, and before they had been getting up in the 30s every week.
Yeah, but
so they had that. So that was a little bit of a wonky,
that's true.
Performance against what we thought was going to be a terrible defense.
But just something to point out. Well, I mean, it was a terrible defense. We threw 3 red zone picks. Let's keep that.
Let's not forget that we actually shot ourselves in the foot 3 different times.
Oh yes, both feet. Each time.
Both, yep.
Did you have anything else for the Packers offense, or should we talk a bit about how Fields presents some threats, but he also presents some opportunities? Because I can talk about that too.
Oh, so should I talk about what I have for... Did
Packers
you finish what you wanted to say about the Packers offense? Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
So I'll say what I have about the Packers offense. So, yeah, as I said, the Bears defense is bad. You already mentioned where they are in DVOA. So I think the Packers should be able to run and pass.
Should being the operative word.
They're second to last against the pass, and their defensive back with the best cover grade was Jackson, and he's out. And their other starting safety, Brisker, who had the second best cover grade, he's also out.
I've been very impressed with Brisker this year.
He looked pretty good actually in that first game. Even that was the second game of his career. But they're their 2 best coverage options in the secondary, and they're both out. And Gordon has played the most snaps of any of their corners, and he's out too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
None of their pass, and even including them, or maybe it's none of their pass coverage players are above average by PFF. And the pass rush is also bad. Their pass rush win rate by ESPN is 18th, and their adjusted sack rate per Football Outsiders is 28th. So they can't cover on the back end, and they can't hurry up the quarterback by getting pressure.
Yeah, and they still have Jalen Johnson, who's a pretty good corner, but the rest of the cupboard is bare. Like, there's nothing there. Pun intended. Pun intended.
And their run D isn't as bad as Green Bay's, but it's still in the 20s by all of...
It's not saying much. The Packers' run D is dead last, and it matches the eye test.
But they're still, in the 20s by all of the Football Outsiders metrics. So it could be another big day for Jones and Dillon, who both succeeded who both did okay in week 2. Jones had a great day. Dillon had like 60 yards, but his yards per carry weren't.
I was going to say 60 yards on 8. Oh, you mean against the Bears the first time?
Against the Bears in the first game.
Okay. Yes.
But he looked like he's against the last week.
It's best Dillon's looked all year, I think.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about some other ways the Packers might take advantage of the Bears. And for me, it's make Fields throw. I know I said a lot of positive things about Fields. He's super dynamic. He's really electric running the ball. He's made some really nice big-time throws, but he will give you opportunities, and I'm going to break some of those down for you now. He's only thrown for over 200 yards once this season and has just 13 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And I know a lot of this is going to come off as Green Bay bias and me sounding like a hater, so I'm trying to stick to the numbers as much as possible. With a minimum of 257 dropbacks per PFF, so that's like half the maximum number of dropbacks you could have had on the year, I believe. He is dead last in the league in passing grade amongst 29 players. He is second to last in completion percentage. He also takes a lot of sacks. Like we talked about, their offensive line's ESPN pass rush win rate is pretty good, or pass protection win rate is pretty good, but he leads the league in sacks taken at 40 per Pro Football Reference and leads the league in sack percentage at nearly 15% of his dropbacks ending in a sack. That's 1 in 6. The gap between him and second is as big as the gap between second and 32nd. Second and 32nd in sack percentage, in number of dropbacks that end in a sack. That's really, really rough. And I would say borderline anemic Packers pass rush might be a get-right game. Beyond that, he also turns the ball over a lot. He is tied for the league lead in fumbles at 13 per Pro Football Reference, and he leads the league in interception percentage at 3.5% per Pro Football Reference. That's the percentage of pass attempts that are intercepted. He has 8 picks on the year, but it's controlling essentially for the fact that he doesn't throw the ball that much. So 3.5% of his dropbacks of his pass attempts are picked.
Okay, those aren't pick worthy. Those are just the ones that are picked.
Yes, the ones that are actually picked. All of this is kind of compounds up to the fact it's compounded with the fact that he has no receivers to throw to. Darnell Mooney is out. Their leading active wide receiver is Equanimous St. Brown, who has 195 total receiving yards on the year. Chase Claypool, since being acquired for, like we said, a top 40 pick, has just 7 catches in 4 games. He's got no one to throw to, which is just compounding all of these other issues. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Does the fact that the O-line and the receiving core is really bad make his passing numbers look worse? Of course. But the passing numbers are what they are for this game. This is not like an indictment on his future. But we've seen quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts last year really lean on the run game, not pass it as much, and then develop the next year. Not saying he couldn't do that. But for right now, he's fumbling a lot. He's throwing a lot of picks for how much he actually throws the ball, and he's taking a lot of sacks. And those are all things that the Packers can definitely take advantage of.
Yeah, in some ways, you mentioned that. I think in some ways he's actually making his O-line look worse than it is.
In some ways.
Because he's not entirely holding the ball too long, can't pull the trigger, can't see the open man, and eventually takes a sack.
Yeah, and he has some really nice flash passing plays. I want to try and not sound like a Homer hater, but he also has the Lions game, for instance, had a really nice game, but then threw a pick 6 right at the end of the game that essentially lost them the game. There are moments where he looks good, and then there are moments where you're just ugh, not great.
Yep.
I mean, not to say he can't be good passing the football in the future, but right now, it's not a great passing offense, and a lot of it
we're just thinking about right now.
Exactly. Dad, did you have anything else ways you think that the Packers could take advantage of the Bears?
So I also had the same thing about Fields will hold the ball too long and take sacks or throw picks, and that he's also fumbled a bunch this year. So, I think what the Packers should be doing their pass rush, they just stay in their lanes and collapse the pocket on him and force them into mistakes. They're also, I think you mentioned something about explosive plays there. And so in the passing game, they're 28th in the league in explosive pass rate. I got this from sharpfootballstats.com. And Green Bay is actually 4th best in the league in explosive pass plays against. So I think that's something that they have in their favor. Of course, I should have put this back a page. I'm gonna visit back a little bit because the other half of this actually goes on the Bears exploiting the Packers. I had this later, and I want to move it up. The Bears are 15th in explosive run rate on offense, and Green Bay is 28th in explosive run plays against. Not surprisingly.
Not surprisingly at all.
So there's a little bit. So what we want to do is force them to try to get explosive pass plays and not have the chance for explosive run plays by containing and forcing him to either eat it or throw it up for grabs.
Exactly. And
which just gets us a little bit of what we want to see from the Packers in this game, if you're ready to go there.
Yeah, let's move into that really quick. I also just want to check very fast what the spread is in this game. I would imagine the Packers are -3 in this game.
Yeah, I was going to say it's somewhere around 3.5 last I heard.
-3 for the Packers according to ESPN. All right, let's go. What do we want to see from the Packers in this game? For me, I just want them to focus on Fields on defense, running the ball. I want 2 quarterback slides on every play. One did not cut it against Hurts. Here's the thing. Question. If Fields runs for no. How many yards does Fields have to run for Barry to get fired immediately after the game? What's the number? 120?
Is 150 enough?
150 is 100 enough? Because you cannot, if you're Barry, let up back-to-back 100-yard rushing games from the quarterback when you know going into the game that that's what's going to happen. And honestly, we talked about this a bit before we started recording. I don't put all of last week on Barry. It's not his fault the defense missed 20 tackles. He had a spy like we asked them to. The spy just couldn't catch him. Spy couldn't tackle him. It's not entirely Joe Barry's fault. But I think if Fields runs for more than $130, I think Barry might get shown the door after the game.
$130. Because I'm thinking if it was 100, it might depend on how he gets that 100. If it's like 180-yard run, that's just one play.
Sure.
If, however, it's 5 20-yard runs.
A little worse. But here's the thing.
That's worse.
And it also depends on if the players are in position. I mean, last week was just a TED talk in how not to tackle.
The only thing I can think of that was worse is the Alvin Kamara run.
Yeah. It's like that.
But that was similar.
Over and over again.
But it was many, many plays.
Yeah, and then I just want to see them play with some pride in the secondary. I thought the secondary was really lackluster in energy and effort last week, and I would just like them to play harder. I don't know. Those are my 2 things that I want to see from the Packers in this game. Did you have anything you wanted to see?
So I have a couple things. So I want to see them play press man on the Bears wide receivers.
Question.
Because they're not good.
Question. Are you sure you want to see them play man when Fields is a threat to run? Because I'm thinking they should play a ton of zone because Fields is the only one that can beat them.
Okay, so the press man has to come with some other things that come with it.
Okay.
But their wide receivers are no good and should not be able to beat anybody one-on-one. I want to see them load the box against the run like they did against the Titans. Because Fields is not as good as passer as Tannehill. And the receiving core, even though the Titans' receiving core is not good, the Bears' receiving core is worse. The Titans at least
a first-round pick at receiver. The Bears got nothing.
And a guy who's historically been pretty good.
Yeah, Woods is Bobby Trees is solid.
But the Bears, however, they got nothing.
They got Bupkis.
And they lost their worst receiver, and it already wasn't very good.
Lost their best receiver.
Their best receiver. I want to see them play a spy against Fields. You want 2.
I want 2 spies.
And I heard
one spy
somebody
was good enough last week.
say this, and I thought it was an interesting idea. Possibly like a safety with more speed instead of Walker.
So Ford?
So Ford or maybe Nixon versus Fields. And so here I looked up some things. So Nixon's 40 time is 4.42. Ford's 40 time is 4.4 flat. Fields is 4.46. Walker's is only 4.52. For comparison, Hertz ran a 4.59.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps it would make more sense to have somebody with more speed as the spy. Because once, and maybe somebody with a little more experience, but Walker took one step out of the way and he had no prayer of catching back up to field to Hertz in that last game. And it'd be the same thing here if he.
I will say Hertz's game speed is a whole lot better than the 4.59.
That's the thing.
Like that he looked way past
his game speed looked really good in comparison. It did not look like 4.59. I agree. So that's one thing I thought about the spies. Like maybe it makes more sense to have a safety.
Dude, spy Jair. I don't even care.
He's a good tackler generally.
Yeah, but he's probably still too small for Fields. I think Fields probably still shrug him off.
And then on offense, I want to see them start with rushing the ball and some passes to Jones and Dillon, because Chicago is also only 18th per DVOA by Football Outsiders in covering running backs as receivers. And then hit the play actions to Watson across the middle, similar to his play against Philadelphia or Watkins' play against the Bears in Week 2. The Bears on defense, I talked about explosive plays of the Bears offense versus the Packers defense. On defense, the Bears are 24th worst in explosive pass plays against, and 26th worst in explosive run plays against. So they're bad on defense in all kinds of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Big plays, everything. I also want to see the Packers convert in the freaking red zone.
Yes.
The Bears are 6th worst in the league in giving up
like
red zone touchdowns.
Eons ago that the Packers were good in the red zone.
The Bears are only 21st in the league in red zone touchdown percentage. So I'd like to see the Bears' bad defense, give the Packers offense some of that good cooking they need.
I would like to see the Packers offense make a bad defense look bad.
Yes.
Simple as that. Did you have anything else you wanted to add there, or should we move on to players we're trying to watch?
Let's move on to players we want to watch.
Who are you keeping your eye on?
So who I'm keeping my eye on is not necessarily who I'm expecting to play the best.
Yeah, that's 100% the same for me. 100% the same for me.
So a guy I'm going to keep my eye on is Kenny Clark.
Kenny's got to play better.
Is it time for a bounce back game for Kenny?
He's got to play better.
If he plays well, I don't see how the Bears have any chance in this game.
Yeah, I see that.
I don't see them being able to generate enough points on offense to keep up with it. So that's one thing. He's had a down game. His run defense has been down this year. His pass rush numbers, though they're okay, are not as good as they've been in other years. And he's been, and I think he actually has been worse lately because he started off the year pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And then on offense, I want to, now that we know that Bakhtiari can't play, and not because of his knee.
Yeah.
I want to watch how Zach Tom is doing, at least I expect, or whoever's playing left tackle. I think it's going to be Zach Tom, because
I would imagine it's Tom.
Last time Bakhtiari had to miss on short notice, it was Zach Tom at left tackle.
Yeah. And he knew.
And it's not
he has more prep than he did that time. That time they told him that morning. It's like, you're playing left tackle today, buddy.
And it's not an imposing Bears pass rush.
No.
So I want to see how he does.
Yeah.
And how his pass blocker. And then I want to watch Christian Watson. I want to watch to see if he gets open across the middle. They can take one to the house again.
I want to watch him just because he's the only guy who's really fun to watch.
To see him to get the ball
fun to watch on the Packers right now.
Over the last 4 weeks, he's actually leading the team in receiving touchdowns, of course, because it's been 6, but also in yards, and is tied for the league lead in receptions with Lazard, and is second to Lazard in targets over the last 4 weeks.
For the team lead in receptions,
for the Packers team lead.
Yeah.
So he was just named
Rookie of the Month.
Rookie of the Month for November.
Yeah. Love to see it.
He's taken over as wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and I hope Dobbs plays, because I'd love to see the future of the receiver room. I feel like it'd be a lot of fun. For me, he's one, Dobbs. I would like to see how he pairs with Watson if he plays. But the big one to me is Dillon. It's getting down to the time of the year where we're planning for next year. And I would say so far this year, Dillon has not shown enough where you'd feel comfortable with him taking over for Aaron Jones if they have to move on from Jones because of cap reasons and have Dillon move into a full-time role. I don't think he's shown enough this year to make you feel like particularly great about that next year. He is coming off his best game this year, though, I would say. And so possibly if he can do enough to finish strong and finish out this year strong, you feel a little bit better about next year. And maybe moving on from Jones is more palatable. But he's definitely someone I'm going to watch because bad run defense, should have a good game. I would just like to see him finish the year strong after having kind of a disappointing showing so far.
Is Dylan the Christmas ornaments? You bring him out in December, and he just looks great?
He has been better in the winter. And you know who else has? Kenny. Kenny's usually Mr. December as well, so maybe you'll get that too. For that, Dad, let's kind of try and wrap this thing up. Score predictions. What do you got?
So the Packers offense has been doing better. They've scored over 30 in, 2 of their last 3 games? And lastly, they've gone... and so I have them... And the Bears' defense is bad. So I have the Packers 31 and the Bears 17.
Nice. I have Packers 35, Bears 28. It's going to be a high-scoring game, taking the over. I'm assuming, this is all assuming that they let Fields run. If they don't, I would imagine it's a bloodbath for the Packers. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling for this game. High-scoring. I think the Packers win. I think Rodgers plays angry, but doesn't necessarily play great, but plays well enough for them to get the W. And that's kind of how I think it's going to go. But we will know come Sunday, and we will be bringing you a post-game on Sunday that you can listen to on any of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, YouTube, etc., etc. You can find them anywhere. And so please come check that out if you liked what you heard here today. Those will be coming out Sunday night. We do 2 podcasts every single week, 1 pregame, 1 postgame. And then come the bye week, we will be doing a little bit of looking forward to next year and towards the draft. Thanks so much for checking us out. Come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. Come subscribe to us on YouTube, Father Son Packers Podcasts. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.